One left. Mordred Padam. I wasn't looking forward to him. There's always been a certain power in despair. It was ugly, venomous, but I'd seen it in the servants of true darkness, or necromancers who have seen their own self-destructive death. They know where they'll end up, so nothing matters except what they want. Maybe they want to prolong their life as long as possible. They eke out every second on the lives of the innocent. I once heard of a necromancer who used a massive bloodstone to leech out a few minutes out of everyone's lives in a square mile every week. There was the classic tales of Koshchei, the Deathless. There's many more, maybe less famous, maybe less complex. Maybe they want to cause as much misery as possible. It is not enough that they are unhappy. All must be unhappy as they are. Murder, torture, and 1,000 other extremities are not outside their abilities. I believe this last motivates demon kind, certainly the feral ones. Lastly, there are those who want to serve some power of night. What cause they serve is their own, but they are unfettered in their service. I think Mordred was one of those. If he was raised from the dead to serve Morgana Le Fay, then anything she desired would also be his desire. What a way to live an immortal life, desiring nothing of your own. I was passing the town of Silt at this time. The hounds and beasts of shadow that had followed my wild chase throughout were still at my side. I threw on my high beams and charged off the road. I ramped from the low ditch over a hillock into the prairie rehabilitation land, and through fences to my target, Silt's Main Street, US 6. None of the shadow beasts had weight enough to stop me, nor could they break my tires with their teeth. My high beams dispelled some, others, fleshy and real, were run down. Sometimes the car would bump and slide in the blood and gore, but my tires hit pavement and caught. I drove down the road towards Rifle, Colorado, with all the speed I could muster. The car still purred, even at full power. The shadow hounds snarled and yipped, throwing themselves at me with all the ferocity their evil hearts could bring. I simply kept my window rolled up and my grip on the steering wheel firm. There were no other cars on the road. Lights came on behind me, and the flash of a gun bursting over the horde. I hoped most would be wise enough to stay indoors. I was the only target of the hunt, but anyone in their way would be torn by shadows. I burned through the distance like fire. Seconds passed, and I could see the dim lights of the town ahead. Rifle. From the street lights and the glow of humanity, I felt warmth. I was going to make it. I squashed those thoughts long enough to pull right off Highway 6 and onto Hospital Hill Road. This would be tricky, unpleasant, but by cutting through the hump of Ash Road in several yards, I'd be on a straight shot to the First Christian Church. I could see hints of the bell tower peeking over the hill. I got off the road and smashed through one of the fences, and then another. I overturned a trampoline and shattered a tool shed. I set the house to rumbling with the fury of my passing. A straight shot to the goal. My tires popped all at once. I didn't see the cause. The wheel jerked and tore out of my grasp. I wrestled it back, but the damage was done. My car had slid sideways and hit a concrete bump in the road. I was still going over 100 miles an hour, the momentum enough to throw the car off its balance. It flipped in the air over a hilltop and slammed down onto its roof. Despite the armor, the weight crumpled it, and I, held by my seatbelt, was nearly smashed to pieces. My sight swam and my ears rang after the catastrophe. The car's momentum didn't end, but it slid on its crushed roof, scraping down the hill for a block or two, past houses and businesses and streets until it stopped. Shotgun shells were everywhere. I hit the emergency fuel cutoff and shut down the engine. They were more automatic motions than anything I consciously chose to do. The world, my mind, and my stomach were upside down. I was covered in spider ichor, and I wanted to vomit. I grabbed the nearest shotgun and what shells I could shove into my pockets. I braced and released the seatbelt. The window had been shattered, so I crawled out, scraping myself to ribbons on the glass. I knew I had no time, so I pulled myself to my feet with the shattered remains of the car. If I lived, I would pay bulldozers full of money to get her repaired. If I lived. I saw that I had stopped at the feet of Mordred. His long black hair fell about his shoulders and neck like a reversed halo. His arms were crossed. Clarent leaned against the wall next to him, bare metal glowing. His armor, arrayed in black wings, onyx, gemstones, and steel dark as pitch, shone like the night sky in the street lamps. He had no shield. The Valkyries that hovered nearby were hushed and quiet. The shadow dogs and beasts, so eager for me, keened like beaten pets and ran. His craggy, careworn face, old and young, did not move from his position of rest. He waited for something. I took the moment to gather myself together. I wasn't going to die here. I snarled in my own mind, not by choice. Something in me, old, feral, beating a war drum, wanted to make him pay for hunting me. I knew he had set the trap, maybe caltrops or something else, where he anticipated me to ride, and simply waited, knowing the inch where I would land. He was one of King Arthur's knights, despite his treason, as much as Judas was one of the original 12 disciples. I could tell from his musculature, thicker biceps on the right side, that he knew his way with a sword. If I came close to him, I was dead. If I ran, I would be chased down. A well-made knight practicing daily could run and win foot races in armor, vault on horses, and perform feats of strength beyond peer. This wasn't just any human, but a man who mingled with the fairies such that they gave him positions of honor in their hunts. I gasped and heaved, trying to gain control over my heart and breath, but the spider had killed my ability to panic. I was drained to the dregs. I wanted to panic, but I wouldn't. I still had a chance to win. I backed away, slowly. I tried to keep the church at my back. His thin lips cracked and his eyes opened. Gray eyes stared into mine calmly and steadily. Such a pauper. His pitying voice was sepulchral, soft, but with enough force to be heard. This comment took me by surprise. Pauper? This is an age of poverty, Jack Morrow. The economy hasn't been doing so hot, sure. I kept walking backwards, slow but steadily, my shotgun ready but not quite aiming at him. I had grabbed the slug gun. I'm sure it would punch through his tin can as much as it had the others. Unbreakable armor hadn't met John Browning. I was talking about spiritual poverty. I remember a time when I could be rebuked by the saints and forced to retreat at mere words. You did not even call upon God properly in your disaster when you flew through the air, nor now. He was right. What's more, you do not have proper armor on, nor a sword. Even your gun is very out of date. It barely knows you. You have no history before tonight. He got up from his lean. His right hand was near to his sword, Clarent. I'm not good at that stuff. It's hard to think about. I was never good at theology or philosophy. I only know that God points me at monsters, and I kill them. I need nothing else. The lips twitched, which is why Artemis was eager to hunt you. Such a pity you already serve Christ. At the name of Christ, his lips cracked and a little blood fell into his mouth. Unlike the elves, he did not react to the pain. You would have been mighty for Otrater if you lived past your babehood. What an interesting and mysterious statement. If only a weird knight smashing cars in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, would explain things to a lowly paranormal Pinkerton like me. The sarcasm caused him to smile. That would make things simple, even delightful. But Morgana has denied me the pleasure. I love to break the schemes of mortal men who think blood in sufficient quantities absolves sins or grants them godhood. He practically spat that last word. Christ's blood was shed to atone sins, even yours. While you still breathe, it's not too late. Ha 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 ha. He threw his head back. One of his bat wings scraped against the wall. It was not emotionless. It wasn't joyful either. It was the cynical, despite its raucous sound. For his throat. Those aren't your words, Jack Morrow. You, yourself, only wish to escape or fight so that you may live. The greater spirit in you, the new man, wishes me in heaven. No. No. He picked up Clarent. As he touched it, the sword gleamed red, then black to match its master. I skipped backwards, keeping my face towards him as much as possible. He snarled, facing me, but looking at nothing in particular. This was the true emotion he showed in his laughter. No, the elves say things like it is better to reign in hell, or what is one more link in the chain? They are fools who will be surprised to wake in hell even as they go wide-eyed to the fire. I say there are no strings on me. No demons inhabit me. I bow to no laws. I was king of all Britons and Rome and the elves for an hour. I gave the death wound to Arthur. He brandished his sword in a knight salute. You are nothing but a child playing in a sandbox you do not understand. A barely sentient attack dog of a god whose retirement plan is death. No one will mourn you. No tomb will mark your passing. What a reward to the faithful. He ran at me, each step a leap, graceful and beautiful. The distance died fast. I dared not show my back, but instead fired a slug into his chest. He dodged as if he were a dancer in a ballet recital, and not a fight to the death. I ran backwards as fast as I could away from him. If someone was behind me, I would not know. Instead, I put as much firepower between me and him. Each slug shot center mass. Each was deflected by the black-hearted Clarent. Each step was graceful and deadly as the flight of a black swan. His cloak billowed out like wings. Each deflected shot pierced through its fabric. I pulled the 1911. One of the shots made it through the whirling steel and pierced his stomach, only to come out the other side of his armor as if no flesh were there. I tripped with every step, but now I fell for real. My heel caught on the sidewalk curb, and I collapsed backward. I tried to pull myself up on the street light, but Mordred kicked me in the stomach. I lifted off the ground and retched, vomiting what little remained in my stomach. I'm not a small man, and that kick felt like somebody shot me through a bulletproof vest. I fell onto my stomach. I tried to crawl, but he kicked me again, flipping me onto my back. I could taste blood, and my hand, acting on instinct, gripped the wounds the pointed shoes of his armor gave me. Mordred snarled. I hope you appreciate me not striking your back. I can respect the fighter. I looked Arthur in the face, and so I do all my conquests. I bent for my holdout pistol at my ankle. He stomped on my wrist. No tricks, Jack Morrow. I snarled at his face. I couldn't get the air to spit, but I glared defiance into his cold eyes. Clarent was up, above my heart. He raised it in both hands. Thank you for gracing us with a run for the ages. You are no disappointment, even in death. His muscles tensed, and he brought the sword down to my heart. "Halt, Mordred, in the name of Titania!" A voice I recognized cried out, and halted Mordred in his down thrust. Liberdamont leaped from his Pegasus to the ground. His spear in hand, he crossed it against Clarent. His golden locks fluttered in the wind, and his jaw was set. He ruined my strike. I wished to test myself against him, as there was no proper blow. Mordred looked him in the eyes, nonplussed. Just because a noble elf does not properly prepare for his opponent doesn't mean another should give up rightfully caught quarry. He shot me while I was speaking. He's Jack Morrow. Of course he did. I'm quite sure it wasn't even the first time he's pulled that trick. Was he supposed to wait for you to strike him? Bare chest, wide-stretched arms? I spat out some blood. I should have had a glowing sign, arrows and all. Mordred crushed my wrists, and I grunted in pain. Lieber's frustration mounted. That's not what I meant. I want him. And I don't have to give him up. I only stay my hand out of respect for Oberon, Titania's husband, who surely wonders why I have not slain my target. When have I ever freely given up what was in my hand? Earl Koenig surely questions why the hunt has not ended. While he does like the chase, torturing prey has no savor. It taints the song that is, even now, being written. Are you going to duel me over his body? That might be a morsel of a verse indeed, though your death song will be longer. Lieber's face reddened. I do not wish to torture him, nor to duel you. I merely want to slay him. The body can be yours after. Is there a price that is worth it? Mordred pondered, but I could see his eyes glitter. There was some sort of play going on here. He pretended to be coy. What do you have to offer? Gold, money, favors in court. My family is mighty among the lawyers. I have that and more than you will ever have, or could honestly offer. No, give me the kerchief that Titania kissed and handed to you before the hunt. What? Why would you want that? It is bound to me. Its magic will not work on you. In fact, its charm was spent saving my life. Morgana wants it, and she will give me things I want for it. Things you can't give me. The kerchief, or I slay Jack, here and now. Lieber stepped back, shocked. Pride warred in his features. He looked down at me, rubbed his chest. He looked off to the distance, then back down to me. He wanted me more than anything, and paid the cost. He took a small square of silk out from underneath his armor and handed it to Mordred. Mordred stepped off me and took the napkin. Without ceremony, he stuffed it into the pouch at his waist and snapped his fingers. From outside my sight, a massive destrier, taller than any horse I had seen before, sauntered up to its master. This was Mordred's horse, Dreadnought. Its power was palpable. Without the slightest sign of effort, Mordred, from a standing position, leaped up onto his horse. For its part, Dreadnought did not act like a man who wore most of a refrigerator had just jumped on him. As he rode away, Mordred called, Well fought, Jack. If you live to see the sunrise, tell Sean Russo that Morgana Le Fay looks forward to their next meeting. With that, he galloped into the night. Lieber looked down at me. What a mess. You're not good to me on your back, as defenseless as a turtle in the sun. He snapped his fingers and 3 Valkyries flew down. They lifted me to my feet and poured choking medicine down my throat. They ministered to me, lifting my shirt and closing my wounds with skeins of silk light as air. The 3 talked in turns, laughing and chatting. Gulp it down, mortal. Bitterness is good for the body and health for the soul. That we could take you to Valhalla. You have earned it. I know a devotee of Freya in a commune in Iowa that could use a man like you. I think his paranoia would drive a mortal woman to madness, sister. It's only paranoia if no one's out to get him. Stay still. I have something for your pain. Sister, fetch the horn. Oh, this is mead from Vidar's own table. You have entertained us well, and favors are being bestowed. I hope you appreciate it, mortal. The sweet and strong alcohol flowed down my throat, following the medicine. Their hands and wings caressed me, and I felt strength in my limbs again. Coldness was filled by warmth. Their beautiful Nordic faces oohed and awed when I stood on my own power. I coughed a little blood, but they wiped it away. With strong hands they splinted my wrist, half using the straps of the iron buckler, and then set it over my knuckles. My gun. They handed me my weapons and helped me load them where my broken wrist and ribs could not. I loosed the knives in my sheaths, checking what had survived. Lieber heard the working of the action and got into his guard stance. Is he ready? The Valkyries looked at one another. As ready as any mortal can be, Elfling. There's no dishonor in killing him, if that's what you're asking. Titania's going to be angry at you. You let a favor of hers fall into Morgana Le Fay's hands. Lieber slammed the butt of his spear on the ground. Begone! With the mighty flaps of wings, the Valkyries joined their sisters above. I was now alone. My clothing was clean, free of ichor, and all the tears soon shut. My wrist was broken and my ribs hurt like hell, but I was on my feet, and the slug shotgun was ready to fire. What's more, I was less than 100 feet from the church. I narrowed my eyes and took my fighting stance. I could still win this. The fight with Mordred had gone on farther than I thought. I could see the car on top of the hill still upside down. I could see the bloodstains where I had rolled after Mordred kicked me. No wonder my ribs felt like they had gone 10 rounds with a mad xylophonist. Lieber looked me up and down. Acceptable. Whatever they may say, this was worth the pay. His spear now rested easily in his hands, and his stance widened. You played a cheap trick on me before. Not now. He had not done his research on me or my employer. Roughly 3/4 of the Paranormal Pinkertons handbook were cheap tricks and how to use them. I made as if to fire my shotgun, but then reached for my grenades. I pulled the pin and softballed one underhand at Lieber. I ran for the church. I could see the confusion in his eyes. He smacked it away from me and him. The explosion rocked me, but the shrapnel missed. It pinged off his armor and spear. One shard of iron cut his forehead, which flowed great gouts of blood. Jack Morrow! He roared. He charged after me. I wasn't very fast, even with the mead of the Norse gods in me, but I had a head start. The streetlights behind him cast a very long shadow. I could see him rear back, his hand out once more as the god of beauty about to throw a spear. I took a pot shot behind me, and he stopped, running after me as swift as a gazelle. The church steps lay less than 50 feet away. I stopped and turned to him as he struck. Lieber de Mont thrust a spear at my heart, but aimed as if my back had still been turned. My twist brought the iron shield up to bear, and my shotgun pointed at his stomach. He saw the maneuver and jumped, even as he made no attempt to stop his spear. The shield struck the spearhead, and I fired my shotgun. The slug missed, but despite the spear cutting into the metal, the shield did its work. I ran at him. I was now inside the spear's distance. I dropped the shotgun and pulled my 1911 from the holster. He dropped his spear, grabbed my shield hand, and judo tossed me to the ground. I fired when I could, separating him from his spear. Snorting like a bull, he charged me. He drew his dirk from the sheath at his back. I rolled back, letting him slash at thin air. I dropped the gun and pulled out my longest Bowie knife. I got to one knee, ignoring the pain of my ribs, and slashed at Lieber's midsection. Now I was about 25 feet away from the church, but I knew one thing. There was no such thing as a knife fight. Knives were too fast and too sharp to be anything less than a fatal encounter. Before seconds passed, one of us would feel the sharp blade cut precious skin and spill blood. As Lieber was an elf with who knows how many years of practice, I didn't set my odds of winning high. I skipped back, letting him slash back and push me to the church. I was just inside the well-kept grounds. I was feeling the cold and exhaustion now. Snow was beginning to fall from the thunderclouds above. The days spent in Denver had hardened me to the elevation, but the wild hunt broke me down. My breath was heavy in my throat, and whatever was in the medicine, it was wearing off fast. I did my best to make it to the church, and he did his best to stop me. I made the first real mistake. I saw a small hole in the dancing feet of the elf, and his eyes blinked when a snowflake struck them. I lunged, hoping for him to back away. Instead, he rolled past my arm and sliced at my neck. He slipped on the new snow, but kept his footing. Now he was between me and the church, barely 10 feet away. I gasped. The blow had not been so deep as it could have been. I felt my neck. Nothing squirted my precious life away. No artery damage, but it was deep. We both bled hard. "Ah, close," Lieber taunted. I had him pegged for pride. He needed to taunt me. "So close. I nearly had you bleeding like a pig. It's no first blood, but I'll take it." He lifted the dirk to his tongue to taste my blood. I charged as his tongue caressed the blood-warm metal. His eyes widened and he cut his own tongue. I grabbed him, clutching him close to me, and ran for the church steps. Do or die. 10 feet. 9 feet. He smashed me in the head with the gemstone pommel of his dirk. 8 feet. 7 feet. He bit my ear, struggling to break free. 6 feet. 5 feet. He turned his dirk down to strike me, and I caught his wrist in my hand. 4 feet. We wrestled. I was weak, and he was strong. 3 feet. His feet touched the ground, and he stopped me, but I pushed on. 2 feet. He struck my ribs, and I screamed in pain. I lost strength and fell to my haunches in a squat. He took 1 step back to keep balance. 1 foot. I grabbed his knees and kept him off balance. I could barely keep the dagger from my flesh, but he focused on it, and not what I planned. With a heave, all I had left, I threw him, and me with him, onto the stairs of the First Christian Church of Rifle. It was done. He screamed and cursed, the threshold burning him. I saw that his appearance had been mostly elf glamour. His flesh, seared by my brimstone rounds, bubbled in hideous patterns. His bones were moving with strange splints and metal rods. I had broken him upon the road when I first shot him. His hatred kept him moving. He danced away from the church, throwing me behind him and ripping off something that burned. He raised his dagger but stopped. A hand appeared in front of his chest. The hand was big enough to clasp him like the hand of a disapproving father on his boy's shoulder. It was gnarled and woody. It cracked whenever it moved, and wood shavings fell from the joints. A massive horned figure stood over Lieber. Lieber towered 6'6" easily, but this giant stood 20. The horns materialized into a crown. A spear was in his other hand. It wore a mask that covered the eyes, looking for all the world like a parody of an owl. Big eyes, beak and all. It leaned down so its head was near to both our own. "Well run, Jack Morrow. Well run. You have made the steps to the church, and have defeated or avoided all 5 hunters. Lieber, you surprised me with your combat and zeal for the hunt. It will be remembered." A poet whispered to me the bars. Grim but golden Lieber brooded upon the dead Jack had colluded with detectives to bloodily slay and save the mortals who could pay. Savage beasts of royal reputation, Jack Morrow slew above his station. Fire-branded Jack of warlike distinction, driving Echidna's brood to extinction. His tone was jovial. "Rough, but it has promise. Let us not break the rules of the game. It would be quite unforgivable, unlike your other actions." Lieber went limp, but his eyes burned. "There's a good lord." The Valkyries came down and picked him up, taking him to the thunderclouds. "I think the biggest winner here was Maravich. He bet it all on you, human." I groaned at him. The giant in the owl mask chuckled. "Not to worry. I'm sure your friends in the societies dedicated to keeping the mortal from the immortal will cover for you." I heard sirens in the distance. I barely stayed conscious to hear his final words. "Jack, I can't promise that you'll live through whatever comes. Just know there's always a place for a man who won't stop until every avenue is closed off and every ounce of strength is spent. If all you know wins, simply call upon me, the Earl Koenig, at midnight, at the middle of a forest, and I'll take you away to be part of my hunting parties." He stepped into the air as if it was a grand staircase beneath him and not empty sky. "Ha ha 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 ha! Shot an elf noble in the air, bribed Artemis with first blood, tripped a mammoth and broke Emran goddaughter's nose, killed a spider with a shotgun at knife range, lived through a fight with Mordred Padam, and used that same first elf noble to vault himself into the finish line. What a night! What a hunt!" I lost consciousness then. Fortunately, Days and other agencies knew an anomalous thunderstorm when they saw it, and were following as close as they could. I woke up days later in a hospital handcuffed to a bed. I had to explain my story several times to different groups, who all asked the same questions. It took me a week to get my car from the police. I only got my grandfather's 1911 and one of the 1887s back, the Brimstone one. I woke up this morning to find some gifts from Maravich at the foot of my bed. The first was a bag of golden coins. It read, "Gratuity for excellent service. Let it never be said I didn't take care of you to the fullness of our relationship." That was very precisely worded indeed. Well, I spent some of that to repair the car. I'll sit on the rest, keep it for a rainy day. The next was a barrel, small for a barrel, a firkin maybe, of mead. That helped the pain. After that was packaged venison with a moon seared onto it. Best I ever ate, and I have plenty for the recovery. The last was a bundle of letters on vellum and written in what was probably human blood, others in ink. Most of it were threats or congratulations. The congratulations were not written in human blood. There was also an invitation to a winner's circle to happen in a year or two. I'm not certain if I can refuse. Control, I've survived the wild hunt. I'm also banged to hell. Since this wasn't an official mission, I'm going to keep it on the down low. I don't know what this will do to my reputation, but I know that fame would be a bane to my work. Jack Morrow, out.